Welcome everyone to This Week in Svelte episode 113, this time for real, because last week was a weird one, actually 2 weeks ago, because last week I was on vacation and I was sick, by the way. But yeah, it was a weird one. Once again, Jeppe is with us, and luckily it was not like pissed that I booked
Oh, no,
him
not at all.
last week.
I have plenty of other stuff to do, so all good.
We need to talk about a bunch of stuff. The changelog will be long, and then Jeppe will talk us about Storybook again. And so let's jump right into it. Let's start with August 3rd with fix reset attribute cache after setting corresponding property. I think this should be basically like in Svelte, there is a cache of some attributes. So like instead of reading from the attribute, because it's quite slow operation on the DOM, we can just read from a cache. So it was not reset, and now it is. This is interesting, like remount at any iteration error. So this, I think it was the behavior of Svelte 4. And now it's also the behavior of Svelte 5. So basically, if you have any iteration error that can happen because like the content changes or stuff like that, instead of just erroring out, we are remounting your application. So you will not get iteration, like the whole HTML will be removed and mounted again, but it's better than erroring out. Now you can also use a wait inside const declaration, which is cool. And we also emit a wait reactivity loss inside for await loops. This is kind of an edge case because like you shouldn't use for await loops in top level of a component, I would say. But if you really want to do it, at least now you get some warning about reactivity loss. Snippet invalid export instead of undefined export for exported snippet. Wrap abort in without reactive context. So when you so you can register a listener, an abort listener, with get abort signal. So we recently introduced something in the Svelte playground. Not in the Svelte playground, in Svelte in general. So you can do import from Svelte, and it should be get abort signal. And this is basically something that, like if you use it, const signal is equal to get abort signal inside an effect, for example. Add event listener abort console.log effect aborted. So this basically will be, it's a signal that will be executed whenever this effect cleans up, basically. So you can do this, for example, you can pass this signal to a fetch request so that if the effect reruns during the fetch, it will actually abort the fetch. But you can also use it for other stuff, like you can pass it to whatever library is accepting a signal and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. The thing that I didn't know, because it's something that it's pretty weird for the DOM. Like generally, when you add an event listener, the thing that invoke that event listener generally invokes it in the next microtask. So I was expecting abort controller to do the same, but apparently it is not. So if you have const controller is equal to new abort controller, and then you can get the signal equal controller.signal. And then if you do signal.add event listener abort. So I was expecting that if you do something like this, let's say that you have let stuff is equal to false, and then if you do stuff is equal to true, signal controller dot abort, and stuff is equal to false. And if you log stuff inside here, I was fully expecting this to be false, because again, generally when you do controller.abort, I expect like the event listener for the signal abort runs in the next manifold,
I see.
asynchronously. Instead, this is actually synchronous. So when you call this, by the time you reach this point, this already run. And this was creating problem, because if you access some dependency inside an effect, then that dependency will become a dependency of that effect, because you are executing it inside the effect, even if the controller is aborting it, and that's why. And so all of this to say that we basically had to wrap in without reactive context, so that when you abort, you are not actually inside the reactive context, because it doesn't make sense, to be fair. Add hint as a possible value for popover attribute. So this is just something like it's a type thing, which is nice. Skip effect inside dynamic component that is about to be destroyed. So this is something that basically when you have a dynamic component and it's about to be destroyed, the problem was that if you change some data, for example, and that make the component be destroyed because it changes, for example, in the SvelteKit router, if you pass some props to that component, the effect will still run. And if you run that effect, but the data changed, you are basically getting the new data with the old component, which was a very annoying thing in SvelteKit. So this is actually fixing it, and it's better.
Cool.
Oh, wow. We didn't have a release for a bunch of time. So we now have the latest of Svelte, which is run blocks eagerly during flush instead of aborting. So this is something that it was causing some performance impact, because basically we had to fix a bug where every time you write inside an effect, we are forced to reschedule the whole effect route. But this was causing problem with some blocks. So when you are executing the if blocks and each blocks and stuff like that, and it was causing some problem. And so now they are executed eagerly. So whenever they are encountered, they are also executed instead of being aborted. And so the perf is much better. Don't clone known proxies in inspect. So if you are inside inspect, we clone your proxies. And this was, I think, causing problem for stuff that was not a proxy, because it was probably making them losing the prototype or stuff like that. And so now it's not cloned. Avoid recursion error when tagging circular references. So this only happened in dev, but basically with $inspect.trace, we are now tagging stuff. So if you do something like this, let's say that you have an effect and you do $inspect.trace, my effect, and then you read name inside, you can see that you actually get the name of the variable here. And to do that, we need to tag this variable. We need to tag this variable in the code. So in dev, you can see that when you create name, we are also saying, okay, this state variable has the name of name. And we did that also for proxies. But the problem was that if you assigned a proxy that was already tagged as a property of one of its property, which is a circular reference, it would go into an infinite loop. And so now it's instead fixed. It's a bit weird that we didn't are we really stopped here? Like there are no more releases? Oh, that's weird. I was pretty sure that we have more releases, but it's fine. Let's switch to SvelteKit that had 18 new releases. So let's see. So we need to go way back. Let's see. So correctly type remote function input parameter from a schema. So there was probably a type error. Match URL encoded new lines in REST root params. Okay. So in the root parameters, if some new lines were URL encoded, it was not matching, and now it is. Correctly spell server side in error messages. That's some nice. Sometimes we get some PR that, I mean, it's very appreciated, but like there's some people that are very fixated on some, like, I don't want this form of communication in the docs. So like they open a PR when they change like 20 files, just changing the same thing over and over.
Right.
Ensure form remote function work when the app is configured to a single output, which is nice. So you can have form even if it's a single file. Use the configured base path when calling remote function from the client. So if you have a base path configured, you can now, like, there was a bug with remote functions, obviously. Add .git at the end of package.json repository URL. I think this was for like some tools expect .git to be there. Okay, we have a bunch of add root ID and root params to navigation target interface, add pending property to forms and commands. So now, basically, if you have a remote function, which is a form or a command, you can actually use the pending to basically, like, if you don't want to use a wait, you can just use pending and like basically get like we have Tanstack router, the Tanstack query at home with Svelte. Fetch imported asset during pre-render. Okay, so during the pre-render, it's importing, like it's fetching all the imported assets. Refactor redundant base 64 encoding decoding function, just a small chore. Use correct cache result when fetching same URL multiple times. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. Don't refresh queries automatically when running commands. So this is actually something that changed in queries. So before, when you were running a new command, all the queries were automatically refreshed. We figured that for commands, this was not ideal. So for forms, it's still correct. So when you submit a form, you are actually refreshing all the queries. But for commands, it is not. And so, yeah, now it doesn't do that anymore. Avoid writing remote function bundle to disk when shaking pre-rendered queries. So, yeah, okay. So it's basically like not writing the remote function if they are shaken basically. Add kit.files.source option. So this is a new option that you can add to the configuration to basically like instruct SvelteKit to like where it can find various files. Okay, so don't treat $lib server.ts or $lib server whatever ts as server-only modules, only $lib server // Okay, so, oh, this is weird. It is a breaking change? No, it is not a breaking change because it's reverting. I think this is actually a bug that was there, but this basically, like, it will probably be the default in SvelteKit 3. but right now it was causing a bug. So make illegal server only import errors actually useful. So then now it actually tells you better. And it's also deprecating config.kit.files, which was very similar to this, basically. And it is now deprecated because this actually allowed you to configure a bunch of stuff of the server, like where is your lib folder, where is your parameters folder, and stuff like that. And the thing is that like we don't want that because we want every time you approach a new kit, every time you work on a new kit project, it should feel familiar to you. So if you can do this and you can change everything about the project, like this kind of stuff is better to be opinionated about instead of like allow configuration for everything.
What's the difference between this and then the minor change above?
This thing is just like you can just configure the source folder, like where is the source folder. So, but then everything inside the source folder is like needs to be there. Like so,
I see.
You can configure it so that instead of source is source instead.
Mm-hmm.
But then like the lib is inside source, the root is inside source. This was a much heavier configuration that you could put, and so yeah. Avoid warning if page option in a Svelte file belong to a comment. What? If page options in a Svelte file belongs to a comment? I don't know what this is about. Let me see. I'm curious. Oh, okay. That's weird. Yeah. The basically like if you are exporting something, like if you're exporting some configuration like trailing slash or SSR and stuff like that, we are kind of trying to prevent you from doing that in the wrong place, but it was very naive. So it was just like, if it's included, then we show the warning. And he said like if it is inside a warning, it's not problematic. And so actually Copilot opened this. That's nice. All right, so allow remote function in all of the source directory. So basically before you can only have a remote file either in root or in lib, if I'm not mistaken. And now it's in the whole source directory. Allow to specify option for the service worker in SvelteKonfig.js. Oh, this is a very old PR that I've opened, but basically, if you want to have some option in your service worker, you had no way of doing that before. So if you want to specify that the service worker needs to be mounted as a module, for example, you basically had to shut off the service worker, the automatic service worker registration in SvelteKit, and then register the service worker manually, which was annoying. And so now you can actually specify the option inside your Svelte config. Ensure button props.enhance work on button with nested text. Oh, that's nice. That was probably a bug. So button props.enhance is the, like, if you're using a form for remote functions, you can also use form.buttonProps to spread that on a button that will have a different action, basically. So it's just like form action in normal HTML. So these allow you to have different targets, like you can change the action, you can change the actual function that is invoking. And so it was not working with nested text, apparently, and so now it does. Pass validation issues specifically to avoid non-enumerable spreading error. Wow. So this is probably like passing back the issues that you get from the validation. generate $app type in a more TypeScript friendly way. So this $app types is the new export that you can import to get information about all of your routes, for example. So this is generated in your project, and you can import it as a virtual module. And the weird thing is that, like, to do this, we basically had to generate, like, to ship a .d.ts file that actually contained like some very weird TypeScript, like a ts ignore inside that .d.ts file, and there was a TypeScript member, like maintainer, that actually looked at it in awe and in like fear. And so Simon actually fixed it using interface merging, which is a more TypeScript friendly way of doing that. So this is a very, very nice thing. So this whole release basically marks the like a brand new feature for SvelteKit, which I actually want to show you because I think it's very, very cool. And it's basically a way to instrument OpenTelemetry. Now, what is OpenTelemetry? OpenTelemetry is basically a way for you to have your application, like, to know a bunch of stuff about your application. You can watch the talk in Svelte Summit about OpenTelemetry. And this is basically what Sentry is doing. Like, they are monitoring your application. But if you have any errors, if it's slow, if it's like if there's some part of your application that is slow. And OpenTelemetry is kind of a standard, I would say, of a spec. But there was a problem, like, to actually be able to do OpenTelemetry on a SvelteKit application, you basically need to like instrument something, and instrumentation.server.ts is the hint, to instrument something before SvelteKit is even loaded. Like, you basically need to do it like before everything else. And so platforms like Sentry had a bit of a problem to deal with this, because like they need to give the user very specific information. Like, you need to launch your server with import, so that basically if you launch node -- import something, it will first import that file and then execute the file. So it was very complicated. And with this change, you can actually do it in a much nicer way. So this is basically now fully supported by SvelteKit. So let's actually take a look at the observability page and actually I will, if you are interested, I will actually send this in chat. But basically, you have these two new configuration. They are under experimental for the moment. So you can enable tracing, server through, and instrumentation server through. So once you have done these, there will be two things that SvelteKit now does. First, it will invoke these instrumentation.server.js or .server.ts before everything else. So this is basically where you can put the code that will be executed before SvelteKit even imports something from Svelte. So this will be the very first file that it's imported and it's executed. And you can do stuff inside here so that, like, for example, you can like initialize your Sentry, you can use this OpenTelemetry SDK node to collect your OpenTelemetry. But that's not all it does, because basically what this does is that if you use this OpenTelemetry API, SvelteKit will now emit spans. So what is a span? It's basically a way for SvelteKit to, like, every time SvelteKit does something, like, I don't know, it invokes a load function or it invokes a remote function, and stuff like that, it will invoke, like it will emit an event that will be listened to from this OpenTelemetry API. And so what this allow OpenTelemetry to do is that it has a very clear path of execution of your application. I mean, I'm blubbering a lot, but I think the best way is actually to show you. So I have this OpenTelemetry application, and I can zoom in a bunch. And this is using, basically, it's like one-on-one what the docs are doing. So first thing first, like you enable this experimental tracing and instrumentation, server true and server true. Then you have this instrumentation server, and this instrumentation server, basically it's importing a bunch of stuff from OpenTelemetry. So it's using the Node SDK for OpenTelemetry. It's using the auto instrumentation node. It's using the exporter trace OTLP proto. I don't know what this is, but and it's using this import in the middle. So what this does is that actually whenever you are importing something, it calls this register option function. And so like this is basically saying whenever there is some import for something, you will invoke this function. And this function basically is also tracking the imports time and stuff like that. And then for the moment, it's just using this Node SDK. You can specify a service name, a trace exporter, and an instrumentation, and then you can do SDK start. You don't have to do anything else in your app, but now you can use something like these, or like you can either use like Sentry, for example, or you can use something like this. Let me show you. Like this is like to show you locally, you can use Jagger. I don't know the name of it. So you can just run this command. So let me run this command. And this will listen, like it's basically a sort of a Sentry. Like it will listen for your response. And then you can actually, sorry for the flash. Oh, I closed the thing. Let me open it again. OpenTelemetry API. So then you can open this localhost 16686, which is where this Jagger is running. And you can see that right now there is no service running. And so like there is no tag, but you can have a list of traces and stuff like that. So if we actually run our application, so if I do pm dev, now I'm running these on localhost 5173. And if I open it, you can see that it takes a lot of time because I actually artificially slowed down this application. With the good old, if we go to the plus page.server, await, new promise, resolve, set timeout. So now, just by doing this, like we have our instrumentation in place, we have our config. If we go back to Jagger, we can see that now we have a service here. And we can look at all the traces. And so we can find our traces. And we have 62 traces. And so we can see that we have a bunch of GET requests. So these are all GET requests for libraries and stuff like that. And most of them are actually pretty like 188 picoseconds and stuff like that. But you can see that there is one that is pretty big, and it's the normal GET request. And like the duration is 5 seconds. And you can see with much precision what it's slowing down your application. So you can see that like the whole request took 5 seconds. And if you open it, you can see that there is a SvelteKit.resolve. So this is like your handle hook. But then there is a SvelteKit load that took 240 picosecond. But then there is another load that took 5 seconds to run. And then you can open this and you can see, okay, let's see the tags. And you can see that the root is the slash and the span kind was internal. And then the node ID was source root plus page.server.ts. And so now you can know for 100% sure, like when, like, okay, so this is very slow. Oh, let me go see. And you can see that if you remove these, oh, I have this super silly thing here. And so now you can refresh. And if we go back, we should have more traces. Let me refresh the page. Refresh the page. Now we should have more traces. Maybe. Yeah, we have more traces now. And we can see that now the GET request is actually very fast. So you can imagine like to have this same experience in Sentry instead of Jagger. And I think I can show you how it looks like, because this was like an effort from Elliot, which is one of the core maintainer, but it was also an effort from Lucas, which worked at Sentry, and he did the talk at Svelte Summit. And so you can see that like this is how it looks like in Sentry. So you can see like very clearly what part of your application is being invoked for each request. And this is all basically done automatically for you. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. To be like fair, I see a question, and I think it's a pretty good point. So let's actually explore this, because the question that I see, and let me actually highlight this. The question that I see from Sergio Generoso, which I know, like, is I think I need to refresh this. Sorry. Okay, so let me do this. I just want you to see the question. So, is telemetry supposed to run on prod forever? Now, if you take a look at the documentation here, like telemetry, technically, it's a bit of an overhead. So before you start doing everything with telemetry, like it should be like you should be mindful about it, because as you can see, it's also like tracing and more significantly observability instrumentation can have a non-trivial overhead. Before you go all in on tracing, consider whether or not you really need it, or if it might be more appropriate to turn it on in development and preview environment. Like it can have an impact. It can have an impact on like performance. So if you're not sure if you need telemetry, maybe like think twice before actually doing it. And by the way, you can also use event.tracing.root.set attribute to even enhance your observability. But if you need to have observability, I think like it's pretty cool that all of this is basically done automatically for you by Svelte. And sometimes you do need, because like you want to know which part of your application is low and which part is actually being booked. So yeah. All right, pass options to resolve in resolve ID hooks. Okay, so we can now see the options in the resolve ID hook. Inline load fetch response body streams data as base64 in page. Yeah, so if you are fetching something and you're streaming something, it's now inline as base64 in the page. Better error when .remote.ts files are used without the experimental remote function, pretty self-explanatory. Configure error reporting when routes marked as pre-renderable were not pre-rendered. So basically, if you mark a route as pre-renderable, but then you don't provide an entries or and you don't have a link to that page, it will actually get you a better error. Use correct flag for server tracing. correct type names for new handle unseen root option, better docs and error message for missing OpenTelemetry API dependency. So that is just docs. Make paths in CSS assets relative. All right, pretty self-explanatory too. Avoid copying SSR style sheet to client asset. So if there's some style sheet that is only using in SSR, is not copied inside the client asset. Allow dynamic env access during pre-render. So this is something that was it was first prevented. So you before could not access dynamic env during pre-render, and the reason for this was because if you are accessing env during pre-render, what happens is that env is not actually dynamic; it's static during the build time, basically. And so this is why before we actually did this. But now this is a bit problematic with remote functions, because if you can use .env, like dynamic env in remote functions, and remote function will be accessed during pre-render, because we need to check if there is a pre-render remote function. And so if we errored out in during pre-render for dynamic.env, it will error out even for remote functions. So we lifted this restriction. Clone fetch response so that the headers are mutable. Serialize server load data before passing to universal load to handle mutation. All right, so when you access data from the load function in the universal load, then this is serialized so that you cannot mutate them. Allow asset to be used with imported asset. So asset is a function to retrieve an asset in a type-safe way. And you can also use that with imported asset now. Support multiple cookies with the same name across different paths and domain. So if you are setting a cookie with the same name, but they have different path and domain, which is something that you can do, now it doesn't error out. Add link header with preloading font. Fix cookies.get returns undefined for just deleted cookie. So if you just delete a cookie and then you do cookies.get, it now returns undefined. Load env before pre-render. This was the other part of the fix for this, so that now the env is actually loaded before pre-rendered. Before it was not, because it was not accessible. So better server-side error logging, just a simple feature. Ensure static error page is loaded correctly for custom user error. So if you have a static error page and you have custom user error, before it was not loaded correctly, and now it is. Oh, there's a lot of add CRCF trusted origin configuration. So this is something. So SvelteKit is checking for client-side request forgery. So if you try to submit a form to a SvelteKit application from some other domain, it will error out. But sometimes it's actually valid. For example, if you are using some payment, for example, sometimes the payment provider will actually make a form request to your application with the data. And so now you can actually specify the trusted origin, so that if the request comes from that trusted origin, then SvelteKit will allow that to work. Correctly decode custom type streams from a server load function. So this was just something that if you were stream something that needed a transform from a load function, it was erroring out because it was trying to access the transport and it was not available in the context of the streamed script. It's a bit complicated, but it now works.
Is this the only thing that's a bit complicated?
Basically, okay, I'll explain it. So How streaming works is that when you are streaming, when you return a promise from a load function, we return the HTML with a stream. And so when you load the HTML, the normal HTML is streamed, but then there is a small script tag that generates a promise on the client. And then when the promise is resolved on the server, a new script tag is added at the bottom of the HTML of your HTML page that resolve that promise that has been created. So that's how you can have out-of-order streaming, basically. What this means is that we need to have, like, if you are returning something that needs to be transformed, the script tag was doing app.transform to access the transformation that you declared. And app is what it was not in the context of the script tag that was added. So basically, we had to do a bit of a change of how the HTML looks so that app is now available inside the script tag that was added at the end when you're streaming. So I hope it's a bit more clear now. Add trailing slash path name when generating typed routes. So if you have a trailing slash, it will actually add trailing slash to the generated types. Ensure importing from $app navigation works in test files. It's a simple fix. And that's it for SvelteKit. So let's see. Oh, we have a bunch of release for adapters. This is probably just something, update error message, avoid erroring on builder properties that only exist on the latest version of SvelteKit, add the instrumentation. Okay, so yeah, we are basically just updating all the adapter to make use of the instrumentation. Yeah, that's basically it. Adapter node is the same thing. Adapter Vercel, the same thing. Enhanced image, let's see. So add.git at the end of the package.json repository, breaking update to vid image tool 8 to auto-rotate image. So actually, there is a breaking change for enhanced image. I don't think it's affecting a bunch of people, but it is a breaking change indeed. So now it will actually auto-rotate image, which is nice. Correctly apply ID filter from Vite plugin Svelte. So basically, Vite plugin Svelte now it's using a filter, which is a new feature of Vite 8, Vite 7, I think, which basically means that it will only invoke the transform of enhanced image if there is like enhanced image inside the code. So that filter basically will make the build much faster. It was not applied correctly, and now it is. So your build should be faster. New release for Svelte package, which is the package to, like, the CLI to package your component. There is a preserve output flag to prevent the deletion of the output directory before packaging. So basically, if you have something in the output directory that you are putting there with a script, for example, and then you use preserve output, that's left untouched. It will override the files anyway. New release of Vite plugin Svelte, which is add API filter and deprecate API ID filter. So that was part of the same PR before. Ensure compiled CSS is returned when reloading during dev with SSR. Ensure compiles, yeah, this is the same thing. Oh, it's backported to another version. Vite plugin Svelte inspector, update usage instruction in README and links to docs. Extension, there is a new bump for TypeScript 5.9. I cannot speak. So new release of language server, which is the same thing, and I suppose new release for SV. So let's see, create update library docs to reflect property pack command. rework precondition. So remove no precondition option from SVAdd and add no git check option to SVAdd with this flag. Even if some files are dirty, no prompt will be shown, right? Recommend the kit.typescript.config setting instead of copying from generated config. Update vit plugin dev to JSON. Vit-config file detection works on both JS and TS variants. I think this was a bug where basically if you had a vit.config.ts, .js in a TypeScript project, it was still creating the TypeScript config. Okay, a new release of Svelte check that handles object literal in mustache tag, which is the thing. Svelte ESLint parser derived argument expression to apply correct type information to these. I don't know what this is about. Sorry. Svelte to TSX is probably the same, and TypeScript plugin support expandable hover. Oh, that's nice. So this is a new feature of TypeScript, where basically if you over some type, you can then expand the type to see the actual type, even if it was imported from a library. So it's now supported from the TypeScript plugin. All right, that's it. Let me see if we have some tracker. Oh, something that I need to tell everybody is that there is a new discussion about, I can find it. Where it is? Okay, I will just access the GitHub repos. Sorry. There is a new discussion in SvelteKit about remote function and specifically about form validation. So this is basically a proposal to see if we should actually validate and convert your form data into an object when you're using the form function. So go check it out, because this will basically allow you to have something like schema, but it kind of relies on some convention. So just go take a look. Oh, go take a look. I'm gonna post it in the chat and comment if you have any ideas about this. All right, so now it's time for me to stop blubbering and for something interesting to actually be showed.
So I think you're overhyping it.
I'm gonna shut up and remove my screen. So, Jeppe, if you want to share your screen, we can actually start talking about Storybook.
I will try. Shared.
All right.
Do you see what I see?
Yes.
Good.
You are live.
So this is the second episode in the Storybook series, and today I would love to talk about docs. Like, many people think of Storybook as the way to document your design system, and that's certainly how a lot of people use it, and so that's what I'm going to show off today. I think documentation is really just about documenting components, and maybe those components are in a design system. Maybe they're just like your application components. Maybe it's your page routes. Documentation doesn't necessarily have to be like some public thing. It can also just be something you write, so it's easier to onboard new team members into your team, right? So that's just the mindset that I want to keep in mind, is that it doesn't have to be about a shared library. It can also just be about your own internal application. So what I'm going to show off today is basically the different features we have for documenting your Svelte components in Storybook. And I have a Storybook running here. It says connection lost. It's not anymore. This is the same repository and same example that I was using in my talk at Svelte Summit Barcelona. is essentially the Svelte demo. So this is the demo you get when you init a new SvelteKit. And it contains this Swirl game where we can guess stuff and then figure out what the correct word is. And I am really bad at this. But luckily, I have all this is of course components, and I have a bunch of stories for these components. So for a specific cell, that's like one letter, I have basically written out all the different states that this single cell can be in, and similar to like a grid, if there's like mid game and whatever. So that's just like the context. This is the storybook that I have, and there's a I'll show off the stories in a minute. And the first thing about documentation is can potentially be thought of like as the controls panel. So we have these different add-ons here, and the core add-on is the controls, which allows you to change arcs or props however you want. So we go up to one or more simple one. We can see here that we have input fields, so we can change the value from B to A, and that's like we here at least is very valuable for like people coming in. They can easily try out props. So that's also a sort of documentation already without even writing anything. And we can change whatever we want in here, and it renders the component dynamically. This is mostly powered by a feature that we call docgen. So docgen essentially is something that automatically inspects your components and then generates information about like which props does this component take in based on your TypeScript types or JS doc types. So if we go to the cell component here, it has like this props interface that we put on the props column, and we're using the same strategy as the Svelte language server is using. So we're using Svelte to TSX to extract all this information and then make it available at runtime. And so I haven't configured any of these controls down here. I didn't specify that value is a string that can change because Storybook does that automatically as soon as you have a component reference here, and that as soon as it's documented. So that's pretty cool. I can configure this manually if I want to. It's a concept called archetypes, so you can specify very manually. I want this control to have these options, or if you want to narrow it down. And this docgen powers the controls, but it also powers the next feature that we call autodocs. So
it's very funny because like I'm pretty sure that I've used this very thing, but I never really noticed. Like
right.
I just assumed that it was like this.
It's actually pretty complicated to get the types out at runtime.
I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah. But I mean, we were very lucky. Some of the Svelte core maintainers actually contributed a lot of this. So, and I'm very happy with the result. It's a bit slow, unfortunately, which you notice if you have hundreds or thousands of components, which some of our users do. But hopefully we can fix that one day. But so if you install add-on docs, there's this package that you npm install, and you add it to this add-ons array, you get a bunch of documentation features. And one of them is that we can add a tag to these stories. Oh, I'm in git diff mode. Let's do this instead. Tags is like some static information you can give, and we have some built-ins. And one of them is autodocs. Thank you. Autodocs will tell Storybook to generate a documentation site or page for this specific component. So if we go back now, we now have this docs entry. We didn't have this before. We can see we also don't have it on grid or whatever. And this is like completely basic default documentation where it will show the primary story first. This is the empty story, so it's just the one on top, and then it will show the controls for that. So if we go here and we edit it, we can see that it works similar to the story, but this is a bit more for people coming in. Outside stakeholders, a bit easier to understand because you don't have to navigate stories. They can just there's one page, and here's how you can try stuff out. And then further down, it will list all the stories that we have for this I think these are expanded due to some styling issues, but they can be smaller. So that's all automatic, and you can generate this for all of your stories or just some of them using the tags feature. We also have pages up here, and they might not make sense to have autodocs because they are very specific. So that's why you want to do it for some and not for others. You can also say with tags, so these are all the stories below, and you can say, well, I don't want this one to appear in my autodocs because this is internal, and then you would do tags and then not autodocs, which removes the autodocs tags from this story. And so if you go back, the width value is now gone. And so that's a way that you can really fine tune what you want to show in your documentation. But you can also put in human readable descriptions. So if you go here to your stories and you put in a JS doc comment above defined meta, we will actually process that. So this is the description for the main, for the cell component, right? Let's put that in. And then that will appear up here. So you can put in this introduction. The cell component can do X, Y, Z. You'll use it in these cases. You'll use it over here. And it supports Markdown. So we can put this as a header, and then we can do Paulo is cool. And then add links or whatever. And then you will see that here. So this is a really useful tool to just easily describe your components. And also in the code, this is actually just also a valuable JS doc comment to have. And I think that's pretty cool. You can also do it on a per story level. So above any story, if you add an HTML comment, you can say this specific scenario should be used here, or the props or these are very special, or whatever you want for that specific usage. Where did it go? Or was that the one that I disabled? It was.
Yeah.
I was stupid. So let's put that back in, and then we see down here, we also have a description for that.
Very nice.
So, and again, this is also Markdown, so you can put in links and whatever you want. Really easy way to write some human readable things for your specific stories. You can also write comments for your arcs or props. So if we go back to the component, and then we do I wonder if we put in, I think at some point we did add support for this. Now let's just see how it works without first. So now I have a comment on the prop type, and it's added to the table as well. It's not added inside the controls panel, but it's in the documentation. At some point we added support for deprecation. I wonder if that works now. I can't remember. Right. No. Probably didn't work. Anyways, so that way you can really specify, and I mean, you should do this even if you're not using Storybook. You should just really put comments on your prop types so that people know what's going on. And so then if you decide to add Storybook later, they'll just get here in a easily readable manner.
Yeah, I don't think about like the opposite. Like I feel like this is a feature that can like help people adding comments, which is a good
True.
thing.
Right.
So, like, rather than like if you do it, then you will find it ready. It's more like Storybook is trying to teach you to do this, which is good.
Yeah, we're trying to nudge like using best practices, right? I mean, the naive way for us would be you need to provide an object, and this is for each property you want the object to have description or whatever. But
Yeah.
we really just want you to write comments because that's
Yeah.
what people do. So that's why we added that. And so that's the autodocs feature. This is like a template. Like it has the heading, it has the description, and then the primary story controls and whatever. And you can modify this if you want to say, well, I want my autodocs to show up differently. I only wanted to show the first story, or there should always be this precursor that says this is a experimental component, or whatever. I'm not going to show that off, but I can show that in the docs here, we show you that if you put in an MDX file and give it a special tag, Storybook will use this MDX file as like the template for all autodocs. And so that brings me to like the next stage of documentation, which is like free form words that are not necessarily tied to components. And there we support MDX. So MDX is usually used with React. And it's also used with React here. Unfortunately, we don't support MD Specs, even though it's pretty cool. I have had a chat with Penguin, the creator of MD Specs. Maybe someday there'll be something, but for now, it's React. And so the way it works is that we can add. I guess we can add anything. New file, and then we'll say this. And then because in our configuration of Storybook, for now, we're not including MDX files. And so I would actually expect this to not work. I'll be very surprised if it worked. It did not. So what we do is that if we add another glob here that targets MDX files, let's do that easily, and then we start the server, which for some reason takes time on my computer. When I came back from vacation, it was like, no, I'm spending 2 minutes restarting. Good. And so let's see if we can. Where is that? Do we have any logs? We don't. Did I put the wrong place? Source. Anything MDX. Huh?
That's just the demo gods.
Absolutely. So is it because it's... What if I put it somewhere else, like just up here?
Yeah, now it's there.
Oh yes, it is. I wonder what happened. And now it's here, and we can put in whatever we want here, right? Static content is okay, right? But we can actually also reference all of our stories if you want to, or reference, well, a bunch of stuff. And we can do that with a concept that we call doc blocks, which are essentially a bunch of components you can import. So there's a canvas component that can be used to like show a story. And this is actually what we're doing in the auto docs. And now you can just build your own. So we can say, let's say we have this, and we say I want to show off a very specific story here for documentation reasons. I would first import the story. Let's do grid stories just for fun. And that would not be in routes. Where are they at? No, where are they?
I think they are in routes, right?
Oh, yeah. Right. And so, and then we can import the canvas block or component from Storybook blocks. I believe it's in, no, like this. And then we can do canvas, and then off is the prop you use to reference your specific story.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just need to figure out which one we want. And so if you find the grid stories, we will take the mid game. And what do we get? What do we get? Did I do this in the first try? No, I did not.
Should it be
Expected
index
closing
size?
tag. I probably did it wrong. Maybe this
Okay.
makes it easier. And then I did not get the input right. So with routes, swirl, board.
Oh no, you are already in routes. So
I'm
it's
already
just...
in routes. You are clever. Yes.
Yeah.
So now we have a canvas with this specific story. And there's even code. Oh, that's not pretty. But that's what the canvas does. And so there's a bunch of things going on here. Like you can use this to put in different stories, right? But there's something going on behind the scenes that makes it even work, because if you're clever, you'll see that there's no export here. Like we're not exporting anything.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we import it, right? And that's because behind the scenes, Storybook takes each story and exports it with its name. So it's implicit that all of these are exported, so that you can use them in different scenarios. In my head, I knew that this was called mid-game without the space, because I know what the exports are coming from. But if that can be super annoying, so there's an additional prop here on story where it allows you to explicitly state how they should be exported. And so now we would need to do this. And we go back to, and this still works. Sometimes TypeScript will yell at you because TypeScript doesn't know about this. I don't have good solutions to them other than like TS ignore or whatever. We can also do, there's a bunch of different doc blocks. There's also a description, which just takes the description of that story if you need to. And then we're going in here and we will do and then we got the description in. You can also get the story rendered but without the canvas part, so you don't get that border and stuff. There's also a bunch of stuff you can do with color palettes. If you have a color palette defined, you can get that also generated. What else is there of interesting stuff? There is there's stories. So if you want to just get all of them, similar to the autodocs feature, you'll just do this, stories, and then you get a list of all the stories that are in there. You did not get all the stories in there. That is very interesting. Oh, that's because you might need to do.
Is it off or is it?
I do think it's.
No, I don't think it's default because like those are named exports, right? So you're
Right, but I wanted. I'm forgetting the syntax for getting the default export from this.
it is not default, but do you want the default export?
I think so.
Because the default export would still be the whole function, right? Like the Svelte component.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? We actually modify the default export in Storybook.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to go into that detail, but okay. So I can't remember how to get the stories off, and maybe it's not that important either. Stories. Oh, it's because only when you are attached. Okay, so there's another feature here is that for now I just have this my custom doc here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what if I wanted this to appear like as the documentation for grid, and I just want to write it completely manually? I could attach it to those stories, and so I'll put in a meta definition, meta information, and then meta of grid stories, and then that tells Storybook, please put it in here.
Okay.
And now you also get all the stories. And we're calling this an attached doc. So those are just all the weird ways that you can write documentation for your components.
By the way, like something that I really like doing with Storybook is actually like when you are writing a story, I write one of this, like, let's say that I need to showcase all the colors all the CSS colors that you can use. I just write a story for it, and like you can write. The nice thing is that you can write a bunch of like even interactive stuff. Like you can write a search bar, and you can search for all the colors, and then they get filtered out.
Right.
So that's something they also like to do.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you don't want to use MDX because you don't want to use React, then
it's also a great way to document stuff, right? So in this situation, it would be like instead of having one story per cell, you could have one story that has all the different permutations of the cell in one story, right?
yeah. I mean, for that, I think it's nicer to have different stories, but like for something that even if you don't have a component, that's what I'm saying. Like even if you don't have a component, but it's something that you want to document, like you want to document, I don't know, all the possible style prop that you can have. I mean, all the possible like CSS colors that you can have in your application, or all the possible spaces that you can have in your application, stuff like that. You can just write a Svelte component that showcase that and have a story be that, so that.
Yeah, exactly. And because stories are just Svelte components, you just do what you want, right? Yeah. We've also seen some really powerful use cases where like they have an icon library, and so they, as you said, they put a search in their stories. You can search your icons just directly in Storybook, right? Yeah, it's a because you get the sidebar for free. It's a pretty easy site builder if you want. Right, so that was docs. I think next time we're going to talk about testing.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's also going to be a lot of fun with VTest.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much, Jeppe. And I'll see you next week. And thank you, everybody, for showing up. And I'll see you guys next week. And I hope you learned something. And see ya.